Grant Caldwell signed his name like he was closing an account, not ending a marriage. The pen moved once across the divorce papers, smooth and careless, while Boston Harbor glittered 32 floors below the restaurant windows. Outside, the winter evening had turned the glass blue. Inside, every table glowed with candlelight, silverware, and quiet conversations that sounded expensive enough to hide cruelty. Olivia Bennet sat across from him with her hands folded in her lap, her wedding ring catching the flame from the small candle between them. She had worn the cream coat he once said made her look soft. He had brought another woman to watch her be replaced. Madison Vale sat beside Grant in a fitted navy dress, one hand resting on the white tablecloth just far enough forward for the diamond on her finger to speak before she did. She did not smile with her mouth. She smiled with stillness, with the confidence of someone who had already been told she had won. Grant capped the pen and pushed the folder toward Olivia. "You should sign tonight," he said, his voice low, polished, almost kind. "It's cleaner this way." Cleaner. Olivia looked at that word hanging in the air between the water glasses. Not kinder. Not fairer. Cleaner, as if 12 years of marriage were a spill on polished wood. She lowered her eyes to the pages. The first sheet was simple. Names. Dates. Property division. No children. No shared home left to argue over because Grant had already moved into a penthouse near Back Bay, and Olivia had already packed her life into cardboard boxes stacked in a 700-square-foot apartment across town. She reached for the pen, but then her gaze caught a line near the back of the packet, printed in small legal language beneath a section titled Mutual Release of Financial Claims. The sentence was too cold to be accidental. It asked her to waive future challenges related to corporate financial decisions made during the marriage. Olivia paused. Just 1 second. Not enough for a stranger to notice. Enough for Grant. His jaw tightened. Madison tilted her head. "Is something wrong?" she asked, sweetly, like sugar dropped into ice water. Grant leaned forward, the candlelight sharpening the clean lines of his face. "Don't pretend you understand corporate language now, Olivia," he murmured. The words landed softly, and somehow that made them worse. Olivia remembered the nights when he did not understand his own investor decks until she rebuilt them at their kitchen table. She remembered changing his numbers, fixing his grammar, calming his panic before meetings where he later called himself self-made. She remembered selling her mother's bracelet to cover the first office lease he now described as ancient history. Her fingers closed around the pen. She signed the last page, slowly, her name steady enough to make Grant blink. Then she slid one copy of the strange addendum into her purse with the same quiet motion she used to fold a napkin. Grant did not notice. Madison was watching the ring. Olivia stood, leaving her own wedding band beside the candle, a small circle of gold cooling on the white cloth. Grant looked relieved, which told her everything. At the elevator, she turned back once. He had already reached for Madison's hand. The doors closed before Olivia let herself breathe. In her purse, the paper waited like a secret that had learned her name. By the time Olivia stepped out of the restaurant, the cold from Boston Harbor had slipped through her cream coat and settled against her bones. The city moved around her as if nothing important had happened. Cars whispered over wet pavement. A couple laughed beneath a black umbrella. Somewhere above her, on the 32nd floor, Grant was probably ordering champagne for the woman who had watched him erase a marriage with one polished signature. Olivia stood beneath the awning for a moment, one hand inside her purse, touching the folded addendum like proof that the night had not imagined itself. She should have been thinking about grief, about the apartment waiting for her across town, about the empty side of the bed she had not yet learned to ignore. Instead, her mind moved backward, not to the wedding, not to the vows, to a kitchen table in a one-bedroom rental in South Boston, 12 years earlier, when Grant had been 29 and terrified behind a smile too. Proud to admit it. His first investor meeting was at 9 in the morning. At 2 in the morning, his pitch deck was still a mess of numbers, borrowed confidence, and spelling errors. Olivia had sat across from him in sweatpants, her hair tied back, a calculator beside her coffee mug, rebuilding his entire forecast while he paced in socks across the linoleum floor. When he forgot the market analysis, she wrote it. When he froze over the budget, she found the mistake. When he said no one would ever take him seriously, she reached across the table, covered his shaking hand with hers, and said, "Then we will make them listen." We. That small word had held them together for years. She remembered the office he could not afford, a narrow space 12 feet wide with bad heating and a window that faced a brick wall. The landlord wanted first and last month up front. Grant said they should give up. Olivia said nothing, went to the bedroom, opened the small velvet box that held her mother's bracelet, and sold it the next morning at a jewelry shop near Tremont Street. Grant promised he would buy it back one day. He never did. Instead, he bought better suits, then better watches, then a better version of himself, one that no longer had room for the woman who had known him before the applause. At company dinners, he stopped saying her name with pride. He introduced her as my wife, in the same tone men used for valet tickets and coat checks. When someone asked what she did, he answered for her. Olivia likes simple things, he would say, and the table would smile, as if simplicity were a polite illness. She had learned to sit still through those moments, to fold her napkin neatly, to swallow the truth before it reached her tongue. The truth was that she had built the quiet foundations beneath his loud success. She had read the contracts he bragged about signing. She had corrected the projections he claimed came naturally to him. She had listened through every midnight panic and every dawn confession, then watched him retell the story as if he had climbed alone. That night, outside the restaurant, Olivia finally understood the cruelty of being erased slowly. It did not happen in one argument. It happened in rooms where her name was left out, in speeches where her labor became his instinct, in photographs where she stood beside him while he called himself self-made. A cab pulled to the curb, its headlights cutting through the mist. Olivia opened the door and looked once more at the tower of glass above her. Grant had not just divorced her. He had tried to seal the past shut before she could read what was hidden inside it. She slid into the back seat, gave the driver her address, and kept her fingers on the folded paper all the way home. When the cab stopped outside her apartment in Cambridge, Olivia sat for one extra breath before reaching for the door handle. The building was old, for stories of red brick and narrow stairwells, the kind of place where the heat clicked in the pipes, and every footstep carried through the walls. Her boxes were still stacked in the living room, labeled in black marker with words that felt too small for what they held. Kitchen, books, winter clothes, marriage. She had written that last one by accident, then crossed it out so hard the cardboard tore. Olivia took off her cream coat, hung it on the back of a chair, and placed the folded addendum on the table as if it were something alive. The apartment was only 700 square feet, but that night it felt larger than any house she had ever shared with Grant. There was no sound of his keys in the bowl, no phone call taken in another room, no voice telling her she was overthinking something she had already understood. She opened her laptop and searched the exact phrase printed on the page. Mutual release of financial claims. Corporate financial decisions made during marriage. Waiver of future challenge. Line by line, the words revealed themselves, not as random legal language, but as a locked door someone had expected her never to notice. At 11:47, her phone lit up. A message from Grant appeared with no apology, no warmth, only instruction. Please leave the ring with concierge tomorrow. Madison and I have a formal announcement this weekend. Olivia stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then another message arrived, this time from a number she did not know. A photograph loaded slowly. Grant and Madison at the restaurant bar, champagne glasses raised, her diamond turned toward the camera, his smile clean and practiced. Beneath it, one sentence had already begun to circulate among people who once called Olivia family. Finally, a woman who fits his future. Olivia did not cry then. The strange thing about humiliation was that it sometimes arrived so perfectly dressed, so politely delivered, that the heart did not know whether to break or go numb. She walked to the small bathroom, turned on the light, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were tired. Her lipstick had faded. A faint red mark circled the finger where her wedding band had been. For a moment, she lifted that hand and almost did not recognize it. 12 years had trained it to pour his coffee, adjust his tie, smooth his sleeve before meetings, reach for him first after bad news. Now it rested against the sink, bare and steady. Near midnight, she called the law office printed at the bottom of the divorce packet. A receptionist service answered. Olivia left her name, her number, and one calm sentence. I need someone to explain why my divorce agreement contains a corporate waiver. After she hung up, the apartment seemed to settle around her. The radiator hissed. A siren passed far away on Massachusetts Avenue. Snow began tapping lightly against the window, soft as ash. Olivia picked up the addendum again and slid it into a plain manila folder. On the tab, she wrote one word in neat black ink. Grant. Then she placed it in the top drawer of her desk, not because she knew what she would do with it, but because some part of her understood that certain papers were not endings. Some papers were evidence waiting for the right room. 3 years later, Olivia Bennett woke before sunrise without an alarm. The Cambridge apartment was still the same 700 square feet, but it no longer felt like a place where life had been reduced. It felt precise. A narrow desk stood by the window, clean except for a laptop, a legal pad, 2 sharpened pencils, and a ceramic mug filled with black coffee. Outside, early traffic moved along Massachusetts Avenue in thin, silver lines. Inside, Olivia opened a spreadsheet before the sky turned pale and began reading numbers the way other people read faces. She had learned that numbers had moods. Some stood straight, some leaned too hard, some smiled politely while hiding a bruise beneath the column. In the beginning, she had taken any work she could find. Compliance summaries for small clinics, budget reviews for nonprofit boards, late-night contract cleanup for founders who paid by the hour and apologized for it. She accepted each project with a quiet yes, then delivered reports so clean that clients stopped asking who had referred her and started asking when she was available again. She did not become loud. She became accurate. Accuracy was safer than anger. It lasted longer. The first winter after the divorce, she enrolled in evening courses in forensic accounting through a continuing education program near Kendall Square. She sat in the back row with a thrift store blazer over her shoulders, surrounded by people 10 years younger who typed faster and spoke as if ambition were a language they had been born speaking. Olivia said very little. She listened. She underlined. She went home after class and replayed lectures while folding laundry, cooking soup, and reviewing public filings until 2 in the morning. Slowly, the corporate language Grant once used to make her feel small began to change shape. Waiver. Liability. Material misstatement. Related party transaction. Breach of fiduciary duty. They stopped being walls. They became doors. On the top drawer of her desk, the manila folder labeled Grant remained exactly where she had placed it. She did not open it every day. She did not need to. Its presence was enough, like a sealed envelope from a former life, waiting without begging. Sometimes, while scanning an acquisition report or marking inconsistencies in expense allocations, she would remember the restaurant candle, Madison's diamond, Grant's soft voice telling her not to pretend she understood. The memory no longer knocked the air from her chest. It sharpened her pencil. By the second year, Olivia had built a reputation among attorneys and investment firms as someone who found the thing everyone else had skimmed past. She found hidden vendor relationships in footnotes. She found inflated projections tucked beneath optimistic language. She found missing signatures, recycled invoices, and budgets shaped more like theater than truth. Clients began using one phrase about her. If Olivia Bennett flagged it, the board needed to read it twice. She heard that phrase for the first time from Evelyn Hart, a silver-haired attorney with calm eyes and a voice that made panic feel unnecessary. Evelyn did not pity Olivia. That was why Olivia trusted her. She gave her harder files, colder rooms, bigger clients. One rainy Thursday morning, Evelyn called while Olivia was reviewing a medical technology portfolio. "There is a fund that needs a restructuring consultant," she said. "High pressure, quiet discretion. The company is in Boston." Olivia turned a page on her legal pad. "Which company?" Evelyn paused only long enough for the rain to tap once against the window. "Asterline Biosystems." Olivia looked toward the top drawer of her desk. The room did not move. The coffee did not shake in her hand. After 3 years of learning the language that had been used to silence her, the door had opened by itself. The contract from Harbor North Capital arrived before noon, delivered through Evelyn Hart with a password-protected folder and a warning spoken in her calmest voice. "Do not treat this like an old wound," Evelyn said. "Treat it like a system." Olivia sat at her desk in Cambridge while rain moved down the window in thin gray lines. She read the engagement letter twice. Harbor North was preparing to take a controlling position in Asterline Biosystems, a medical technology company that had grown quickly, advertised loudly, and reported profits clean enough to make investors comfortable. The fund needed someone quiet to examine whether that comfort was earned. Olivia accepted the work with one sentence. Send me everything. By evening, the company opened before her in layers. Board minutes, vendor agreements, clinical support budgets, executive approvals, forecast presentations, expense schedules. Every document had the same polished surface Grant had once carried into restaurants and conference rooms, but Olivia had learned to look beneath polish. The first irregularity appeared in a vendor file labeled routine software integration. The contract amount was too round. The service description was too vague. The payment schedule moved in perfect steps, as if someone had drawn it for appearance instead of need. Olivia highlighted the line, then followed the vendor name through state filings, procurement emails, and old attachments buried in a shared archive. At 1:13 in the morning, she found the connection. The vendor's registered address matched a private office suite used by a consulting group tied to Madison Vale's public relations firm. Olivia leaned back, not in surprise, but in recognition. Vanity had a paper trail. By the third day, the pattern had widened. Funds meant for employee health programs had been reclassified as external growth initiatives. Training budgets had disappeared into branding campaigns. A pilot program for field nurses had been delayed, while senior executives celebrated a quarter that looked better than it was. Grant's name appeared again and again, not as a footnote, not as a bystander, but as approval authority. Grant Caldwell, Executive Vice President of Operations. Approved. 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 His signature had changed since the divorce papers. It had become larger, more certain, almost theatrical. Olivia studied it without touching the screen. Once, that signature had removed her from a marriage. Now it sat on documents that could remove him from a company. She did not smile. Smiling would have made it personal too soon. Instead, she built a timeline. She placed each decision beside each budget transfer, each vendor payment beside each internal complaint, each public statement beside the private numbers that contradicted it. She called Evelyn after midnight on the fifth day. This is not just aggressive reporting, Olivia said. There are related party issues, concealed conflicts, and misallocated funds tied to executive approvals. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Papers shifted on her end of the call. Can you prove material impact? Olivia looked at the spreadsheet glowing. On her laptop, one column showed reduced employee benefits. Another showed increased executive marketing expenses. A third showed projected cost savings used to impress investors. Yes, she said. And there is something else. She opened the old manila folder from her top drawer. The corporate waiver from her divorce lay inside, still crisp, still patient after 3 years. She placed it beside the Asterline documents, and the room seemed to narrow around the truth. The clause Grant had pushed across the restaurant table was not random. It was protection, not from a bitter ex-wife, from a witness who had once known how his numbers were built. The next morning, Olivia walked into Harbor North's Boston office wearing a charcoal suit, low heels, and no jewelry except a small watch. The conference room overlooked the financial district, all glass and steel under a pale sky. 3 partners waited for her. Evelyn sat at the far end with a legal pad closed in front of her. Olivia connected her laptop, opened the first slide, and let silence settle before she spoke. Asterline is not broken, she said. It is being dressed up by the people trusted to protect it. Then Grant's signature appeared on the screen, clean and undeniable. By the end of Olivia's presentation, no one in the Harbor North conference room reached for coffee. The screen had gone dark, but Grant's signature still seemed to hang in the glass walls, reflected against Boston's financial district like a stain the morning light could not wash out. One partner closed his folder. Another removed his glasses and looked toward Evelyn Hart. Evelyn did not look surprised. She looked satisfied in the quiet way of someone who had waited for facts to finish speaking. What do you recommend? The managing partner asked. Olivia stood beside the long table with both hands resting lightly on the remote. 3 years earlier, Grant had told her she did not understand corporate language. Now every person in the room was waiting for her to translate a company's hidden damage into action. Harbor North should proceed with the controlling position, she said. Then request an emergency board session, freeze discretionary vendor payments, preserve executive communications, and remove any officer tied to the approvals pending a full internal review. No one said Grant's name at first. They did not need to. It was already printed across too many documents. Evelyn opened her legal pad. You understand what this means for you personally. Olivia's face remained calm. Yes. He will say this is revenge. Then he will have to explain why revenge came with invoices, signatures, payment trails, and board minutes. The room stayed silent for one more second, and in that second Olivia felt something inside her settle into place. Not joy, not anger. Alignment. The truth had finally found a table large enough to hold it. By late afternoon, Harbor North had approved the next phase. A secure data room was created. Legal notices were drafted. Voting agreements moved through private channels. Evelyn sent Olivia a calendar hold for the following Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. Subject line, Asterline Biosystems Board Review. Attached beneath it was a file named Executive Separation Materials. Olivia read the title twice, then closed her laptop. Outside, rain had stopped. The city looked rinsed and cold. When she returned to Cambridge that evening, an envelope was waiting in her mailbox, heavy cream paper with the Asterline logo embossed in silver. For a moment, she thought it had come from Harbor North. Then she saw the handwritten note tucked under the flap. Olivia, I heard you were still in Boston. You should come see what real success looks like. Grant. The invitation inside was for Asterline's annual leadership gala, Saturday night at the Seaport, black tie, dinner service at 7, award presentation at 8:30. Grant Caldwell was listed as the recipient of the Leadership Integrity Award. Olivia stood in the lobby of her brick apartment building, the overhead light humming softly, and looked at his name printed in elegant navy ink. It was almost beautiful, the confidence of it. He had invited her not because he missed her, not because he respected her, but because he wanted an audience for the version of himself he had sold to the world. He wanted the woman he had dismissed to sit quietly in a ballroom and watch him be applauded. Upstairs, she placed the invitation on her desk beside the old manila folder labeled Grant and the new termination packet from Evelyn. 2 papers. One from the man who thought he had buried her. One from the room that had finally seen him clearly. Her phone lit up with a message from Evelyn. Board meeting confirmed. Bring the full package. Olivia looked from the gala invitation to the legal file, then typed only 3 words back. I will attend. The next evening, she took her black suit from the closet, brushed the sleeve, and laid it across the chair. Not armor, not costume, just cloth, pressed clean for a woman who no longer needed to raise her voice to enter any room. Saturday night arrived wearing glass, music, and polished lies. The Asterline Gala filled the Seaport ballroom with the kind of brightness that made every surface look expensive and every smile look rehearsed. Floor-to-ceiling windows held the dark Boston harbor outside like a framed secret, while inside, waiters moved between round tables with silver trays and quiet steps. The company logo glowed across a blue-lit stage. Beneath it, Grant Caldwell stood surrounded by executives, donors, and board members who laughed at his measured jokes, as if confidence itself were a form of proof. Madison Vale rested one hand on his arm, her diamond flashing each time photographers lifted their cameras. Olivia entered alone at 7:23, wearing a black suit tailored close to the body, simple heels, and a white silk blouse buttoned to the collar. No glitter, no dramatic entrance. Just a woman walking into a room that had once been used to measure her and finding the scale no longer mattered. A few heads turned, not many at first. Then Grant saw her. His smile sharpened before it widened, the way it had years ago when he believed he controlled the story before the first word was spoken. Madison followed his gaze and leaned close to him. Is that her? She asked softly. Grant lifted his glass. My ex-wife, he said, just loud enough for the circle around him to hear. Olivia always preferred simple rooms. I thought tonight might broaden her perspective. The group offered small, polite laughs. Olivia heard every one of them. She did not stop walking. She accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and held it untouched. Grant stepped toward her with Madison beside him, both arranged like a photograph meant to be admired. Olivia, he said, I was not sure you would come. You invited me, she replied. Her voice was even, quiet enough that he had to listen carefully. I did, he said. I thought you should see how far Asterline has come. He glanced around the ballroom as if the chandeliers, the ice sculptures, and the printed award programs belonged personally to him. Some people only understand success when they stand close to it. Madison smiled at that, and Olivia noticed how quickly her eyes moved over the room, checking who had heard. It was a habit Olivia recognized. People who lived on admiration were always counting witnesses. Before Olivia could answer, a photographer approached. "Mr. Caldwell, Miss Vale, one more by the stage?" Grant placed a hand at Madison's back and turned, then paused as if remembering Olivia existed. "You do not mind, do you?" Olivia looked at the stage where his name shone on the screen beneath the words Leadership Integrity Award. For a moment, she saw another table, another candle, another paper pushed toward her while he waited for her to disappear neatly. Then she looked back at him. Not at all. He walked away smiling, believing her silence was the same old surrender. Olivia crossed the ballroom and took a seat near the back, exactly where the shadows softened the edges of the room. On her phone, an encrypted message from Evelyn appeared without sound. Voting control finalized. Emergency board session remains confirmed for 9 o'clock Monday. Olivia placed the phone face down beside her untouched water. On stage, the master of ceremonies began praising Grant's vision, discipline, and ethical leadership. The applause rose around her, warm and obedient. Grant stepped into the lights, Madison watching from the front table with practiced pride. Olivia looked at the program in her hand, then at the man accepting applause for a company he had quietly hollowed. She did not clap. She simply turned one page of the program with slow, careful fingers, as if preparing to read the next document in a file that was not finished with him yet. Monday morning came without ceremony. At 8:57, Olivia stepped out of the elevator on the 26th floor of Asterline Biosystems, carrying a black leather portfolio in one hand and nothing in the other. The lobby smelled of fresh coffee, glass cleaner, and expensive flowers left over from the gala. On the wall, a framed photograph from Saturday night already showed Grant Caldwell standing beneath the stage lights, one hand around his award, Madison smiling beside him as if history had been polished and mounted overnight. Olivia walked past it without slowing. The boardroom waited at the end of a corridor lined with frosted glass. Inside, Evelyn Hart sat with a closed legal folder. Harbor North's managing partner sat beside two directors, and a brass nameplate had been placed at the center seat facing the door. Olivia Bennett, Special Restructuring Authority. Olivia looked at it once, then sat down. At 9 o'clock exactly, Grant entered with his phone in his hand and the relaxed confidence of a man expecting inconvenience, not consequence. He had not been told who would lead the review. His smile lasted until he saw her. The room seemed to take one quiet breath. "What is this?" he asked, looking from Olivia to the board members, then to Evelyn. No one rushed to answer. That was the first thing that unsettled him. For years, rooms had made space for his voice before he even used it. This room did not. Olivia opened her portfolio and placed two documents on the table. One was the old corporate waiver from the divorce packet, still smooth, still marked by the fold she had carried home through the winter 3 years earlier. The other was Harbor North's audit summary, thick with exhibits, signatures, vendor trails, and board minutes. Grant stared at the first page as recognition moved across his face in a thin shadow. "You kept that," he said. Olivia did not look away. "You asked me to sign it because you believed I would never understand why it mattered." Grant gave a short laugh, but it arrived without strength. "This is personal." Evelyn opened her folder. "The review is supported by documentation independent of Miss Bennett's prior marriage to you." The managing partner slid a tablet toward Grant. On the screen were the vendor payments tied to Madison's consulting network, the reclassified employee health funds, the delayed field nurse program, and the executive approvals carrying his signature. Approved, approved, approved. The same word repeated until it no longer sounded like authority. It sounded like evidence. Grant's face tightened. Those were strategic decisions. Olivia turned one page. Strategic decisions are documented. Concealed conflicts are hidden. One director lowered his eyes. Another folded his hands. The power in the room did not rise. It cooled. Grant looked toward the glass wall, as if someone outside it might rescue the version of him that had walked in. No one came. The vote took less than 4 minutes. Executive removal pending internal review. Immediate access restriction. Preservation of communications. Separation materials effective that morning. When the legal folder reached Olivia, Grant stood halfway from his chair. "You cannot be serious." Olivia uncapped her pen. For 1 second, The room returned to the restaurant in her memory. Candlelight, cream paper, his voice telling her not to pretend. Then she lowered the pen to the page. "You made paperwork feel like an ending once," she said quietly. "Today, it is accountability." Her signature crossed the termination letter in one clean line, and this time, Grant was the one watching from the other side of the table. For several seconds after Olivia signed, no one moved. The pen rested beside the termination letter, ordinary and black, yet the room seemed to understand that something larger than a signature had just crossed the table. Grant stared at the page as if the ink might change if he looked long enough. It did not. Evelyn Hart gathered the supporting documents with the calm efficiency of a woman who believed the law worked best when it did not perform for an audience. The managing partner informed Grant that his access to company systems had been suspended. His company phone would be collected, and all communications relevant to the review were under preservation notice. Grant looked at Olivia then, not with the confidence he had carried into the boardroom, but with the confusion of a man who had mistaken silence for weakness for far too long. "So this is what you wanted," he said. "To ruin me." Olivia closed her portfolio slowly. "No," she answered. "What I wanted was the truth, to stop being afraid of your title." The words did not rise. They did not need to. Through the glass wall, employees moved past the corridor with coffee cups and laptops, unaware that the man whose photograph still hung in the lobby was being removed from the story he had spent years polishing. A human resources director entered with a neutral expression and a sealed envelope. Grant took it without looking at her. His badge was placed on the table. A small piece of plastic, white with blue lettering, worn at the edges from years of opening doors for him. When the system update completed, a soft electronic tone sounded from the security console outside. "Access revoked." It was not dramatic. It was barely louder than a microwave chime. Yet Olivia felt the finality of it more sharply than any speech. Grant walked out first, his steps controlled, his shoulders trying to remember their old shape. In the lobby, Madison was waiting near the framed gala photograph, phone in hand, her face carefully arranged until she saw the envelope. Her eyes moved from Grant to Olivia, then to the board members behind them. She did not ask what happened. People like Madison understood power by temperature, and the room around Grant had gone cold. She took half a step back. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but Olivia saw it. Grant saw it too. For the first time, he looked less angry than alone. Near the elevators, he turned once more. "You were never this hard when we were married," he said. Olivia held the old manila folder against her side. Inside it was the waiver, the paper he had believed would close her mouth forever. "I was not hard," she said. "I was being trained by what you survived by pretending not to see." The elevator opened. Behind him, he had no answer left, only the award photograph on the wall and the woman in front of him who no longer needed either apology or applause. After he was gone, the lobby became quiet in a different way, not empty, but lighter. Later that afternoon, Olivia reviewed the emergency budget restoration. The field nurse program would restart within 60 days. Employee health funds would be returned to their original purpose. Vendor contracts tied to conflicts would be frozen pending review. An operations manager with tired eyes stopped beside the conference room and said, "Thank you." People were afraid no one was looking. Olivia nodded, and for the first time that day, her expression softened. That was the part Grant would never understand. The signature had not been about destroying him. It had been about returning weight to the people he had treated as numbers. At dusk, Olivia stepped out of Asterline's building into the cool Boston air. The harbor was silver beneath the evening sky, the same water that had glittered below the restaurant 3 years earlier. She stood for a moment with her coat open and her hands free. No ring, no borrowed name, no room left to ask permission from. The first paper had tried to erase her. The last one did not make her cruel. It made her impossible to erase again.